Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, Marie. Today I'll be doing my August wrap up. So before I get started, if you are new to this channel, please don't hesitate to subscribe down below as well as hit the notification bell. But I can safely say that August is probably my best reading months of this year so far, because somehow, even though I feel like I didn't really read a lot, but I read 19 books, which meant I read a total of 7,350 pages, which is honestly such a shocker for me. And out of those 19 books, I gave 6 books 3 stars, 2 books 3.5 stars, 7 books 4 stars, and 4 books 5 stars. So as you can clearly see, like I had nothing that was under 3 stars. But the first book I want to talk about is By Your Side, which I gave 3 stars. This basically follows a girl called Autumn, where one day she's with her friends. They have this whole like weekend trip kind of planned out for the long weekend, and somehow they end up at the library, and for some reason her friends leave without her. Basically they all thought that she had gotten into a car with someone else, but she didn't. So she's now left alone in this library by herself after hours during a holiday long weekend. So there's no heater because the electricity is pretty much shut off to conserve energy. There's obviously very little food there, and she is now trying to figure out what to do next. She thinks that her friends will come back once they realize that she's been forgotten, but for some reason they never show up. And suddenly she finds that she is not alone in this library. Instead, there is another high school student that she knows in there with her, and so together the two of them kind of form a friendship. They kind of learn to survive together, etc. And I would say that this premise is pretty much only the first half of this book. Once kind of things, you know, happen from there, there's another major part about this book about just their friendship and relationship, etc. And this book was interesting. It was definitely a fast-paced book, quick read. This was just a fun read. There's not a lot of substance to it for the most part, so while I enjoyed it, I think this is only a 3-star read for me. Then this next book I picked up is Mulan Before the Sword by Grace Lin. This book I gave 4 stars. This is basically a prequel to the Mulan story that we all know, and this basically follows when she's a younger girl, and one day her younger sister ends up being poisoned by a spider. So now she's trying to figure out what to do to save her sister, and she decides to find this renowned healer, and turns out that this healer is a little bit more than she had imagined, and together the two of them go on this adventure to find the cure to save her sister from this poisonous spider bite. This was such a fun read. It was such a fast read. I literally flew through this book within a day, I want to say, because it was just so easy to read. I also did not realize until later that this is very much a middle grade book, and it very much reads like one because it is very, you can definitely tell from the writing style that it's meant for a younger audience, which makes sense. And that's also probably why I read this book so fast, because like everything was just very simple. The sentences were simple, like everything was just an easy breezy read, and it was just enjoyable. Like I actually really thoroughly enjoyed this book, like way more than I expected, because I guess I didn't really know what to expect going into this book, so I was very pleasantly surprised. Next book I picked up is An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. I actually read this book during my magical weekend reading vlog, so I will link that above and down below in case you want to check that out. But I gave this book 3.5 stars. I'm not going to go too much into this book since I did talk about it more in detail in that vlog, but I enjoyed this book. I definitely say that I liked her sophomore book, which is Sorcery of Thorns, a lot more compared to this one. This is her debut book, and I can definitely see that there is a difference in the writing style and like the maturity of the book. I also didn't really feel as connected with the characters in this one, nor did I care too much about the romance. I just felt the romance here was very unrealistic, just because the author just breezed through their entire like getting to know each other stage, and so when they actually had all these feelings, it kind of came out of the blue to me. So it wasn't something that I was very invested on or connected with, just purely because I never felt like I was part of the journey of the romance to start off with. So while I did like the whimsical style and the story itself, it was definitely not an amazing read, but I still enjoyed it overall, so I gave this book 3.5 stars. Then the next book I picked up is The Hating Game, which I gave 3 stars. I got this as an audiobook, and I don't know, I was kind of just like trying to find something to read, and this was just on my TBR on Goodreads for the longest time, and it happened to just be available on Libby, so I figured I'd just pick it up and just bust it out and see how it goes. This book very much reads like a movie. Like the entire time I can just watch everything play out in my mind, because it was so easy to like see everything, I guess, like mentally, just from the writing style and the romance and everything. And I completely understand why this got made into a movie, because it very much reads like a movie. But basically this follows a girl who has this intense rival at work with this guy, and this intense rivalry forms into an attraction for each other, even though this attraction was already there to start off with. But they were just like against each other due to various reasons. And as the book kind of continues, there's this undeniable chemistry between the two of them, and it finally just implodes while they try to basically compete against each other to get a senior position. And this was just such a fun read, very smutty, like more smuttier than I expected, but this was not as amazing as I expected because I've heard so many good things about this book. And while it was entertaining and it was fun and I was engaged with it, I guess I just expected a lot more just because of all the expectations and stuff that I've heard about this book, and it didn't quite live up to that. Okay, then this next book I picked up is Crave by Tracy Wolf. This is another book that I read for the Magical Readathon. I gave this book 3 stars. This was pretty much just like you expected. It is very much reminiscent of Twilight. It gave me such throwback vibes to my high school days when I read Twilight series for the first time. It basically follows a girl who goes into this boarding academy after her parents pass away because this academy is run by her uncle, and it turns out that there is obviously a lot more than meets the eye with this academy, with the students there, and you know, things kind of happen. There's obviously vampires in here. For those who don't know, it's very obvious, but it's just so like, it's very like high school angst vibes, and it was just a fun, entertaining read. There's not a lot more to it than that, but I don't think I'll continue on the series because I feel like I can already kind of see how the series will play out with the characters and just like the plot overall, so I don't really see a need to continue on with the series because even though it was fun and entertaining, I never felt that invested with the characters and like what they're going through, so I will not be continuing on the series even though this is still a pretty good read. Then this next book I picked up is XOXO by xoxo. This book I gave 4 stars. I really enjoyed this book. This was such a cute rom-com set in Korea. This basically follows a girl called Jenny who is trying to become a professional cellist. One day she had some sort of competition or something like that, and she got feedback saying that even though she is very gifted in terms of the technical skills, she doesn't have a lot of soul behind what she's playing. And so that night she ends up meeting a guy called Jae-woo who turns out to be part of a really famous Korean boy band, and she doesn't realize this until one day she ends up going to Korea for a couple months due to like family reasons, and she finds out there that he's actually famous and he goes to the same school as her. And so things obviously happen between the two of them as they try to navigate the whole celebrity status while she's also in Korea for the first time, living in Korea, going to school in Korea, just juggling all of the differences, the cultural differences. And honestly, this was such a fun read. I really enjoyed everything about this book. I thought the characters were well done. I love the romance in here. I felt like everything was very believable in terms of just how different their worlds were and all the obstacles they had to face for them in a relationship. And it was just a very entertaining read, and I don't know, I just really enjoyed it. The next book I picked up is They Went Left by Monica Hess. This book I gave 3 stars. This is a historical fiction that's set in World War II where it follows a girl who, now that she's been saved and has recovered from what had happened to her during the concentration camps, she's on this quest to find her brother because she knows that the rest of her family are dead. At one point they went left, which led them straight to the gas chambers, and her brother are the only ones who went right. So she knows that her brother and her are the only ones who have survived or potentially have survived, so she's doing everything she can. She's going to different camps, going to different like areas to find her brother. Basically anywhere that she thinks is possible where survivors of the concentration camps gathered, she went there to search for him. And so that's what the story is about. I felt like it was a very powerful read in terms of what a sister would do to find her brother, as well as just the setting. Obviously it's just like what they went through and what they're going through after, and even though they were saved, it didn't really feel like they were actually saved and on the road to recovery until much later, just because of all the horrors and the sufferings that they went through. And it took a long time for them to actually feel like they are actually saved. And so just reading about that journey and just reading about her story and the things that she had to deal with was just very powerful. The reason why I didn't give this book 3 stars is because I have read other historical fiction novels set in the same period, and I felt like this book did not tug at me the same way as it did for the other ones. And so I felt like even though this was a powerful read, it didn't, I don't know, like I feel like it just didn't have the same emotional connection with the characters. Not to mention I feel like the ending and kind of what happened there was a little bit weird to me. Like, okay, I don't know, it was just like off. Like the whole brother situation and the ultimate decision that she made regarding her brother was just, I don't know, like a little bit weird. Like I can kind of see it, but also like not. I don't know, I just feel like I was not the biggest fan of like the ending, I guess. The next book I picked up is 7 Dirty Secrets by Natalie D. Richards. This book I gave 3 stars. It follows a girl called Cleo, where on her 18th birthday she receives some sort of surprise scavenger hunt, and at first she was kind of excited for it. She thought that it's for sure her best friend or her brother who did this and organized a scavenger hunt, but before long she realizes that this has something to do with her ex who had passed away on a previous trip with all of their friends. And as the book kind of continues, you find out what exactly happened to her ex and why the scavenger hunt seems to torment her on the events leading up to his death. And this book, I feel like I was waffling between DNFing this book early on, because I was kind of like, I don't know, like it's thriller, but it just wasn't like as engaging, and I wasn't as riveted as I normally am for thrillers. So I was kind of like, do I really want to continue on with it? But then I got to a point that I was like, you know what, I'm kind of invested, because I feel like I want to know who actually is behind it. And I had a very good suspicion on who was behind it, so I wanted to know if I was right or not. And that kind of what propelled me to actually finish the book. And sadly, I was right. I hate it when I'm right, because I like being surprised when I read thrillers, because I feel like there needs to be that element of surprise and that plot twist. And I feel like, yes, there was a plot twist, but that was a plot twist I already guessed. So for me, it's like not really a plot twist. But I still thought like the overall book was interesting enough. It kept me still engaged because I wanted to know if I was right or not. But that was kind of it for this book. Next book I picked up is Book of Night by Holly Black. I gave this book 4 stars. So this book is all about like shadow magic. It follows a girl called Charlie Hall, where she has a very suspicious background, and you don't really know exactly what she did in the past until you read more into the book. But she's now a bartender at this like seedy-ish looking nightclub, and before long she finds herself back into the shadow world, where basically shadows are now this substance. Like they have this like there's an actual figure, and there's magic involved with the shadows. There's a lot of like terminology in this book, and a lot of like magical terms, and just learning about the magic system was definitely had a learning curve. But overall I enjoyed this book. I would say that this book, I don't know, for some reason it gave me very like Leigh Bardugo, Ninth House vibes. I think it's because they're both urban fantasy. They're both doing like shadowy dark things, and they're both by authors that are very successful YA authors, fantasy authors that wrote urban fantasy as their adult debut. So I feel like with all those combined, it just gave me like reminiscent of Leigh Bardugo's book, just like the atmospheric and like the dark vibes, etc. And once I felt that, I can't get over it. I'm like, every time I think of this book now, I think of Ninth House. But I do think I like this book more than Ninth House, because I felt more invested with Charlie Hall's story. I felt more invested with Vince, and the ending was very intriguing, because Vince's like identity was definitely, I was not expecting that at all. So I'm super curious to find out like what will happen next, especially the ending. The ending was like caught me off guard. I did not expect it the way how it went. So yeah, I definitely can't wait to read the next book. Next book I picked up is Big Lies in a Small Town by Diane Chamberlain. This book I gave 4 stars. This book follows 2 timelines, one in 2018 where a girl, due to circumstances, she's now in prison, and she was given parole by a guy who had passed away, but his will basically instructed his daughter to get this girl out of prison and basically have her be the one to restore this painting. And this book is also set in 1940s, where it kind of goes into the history of this painting and the artist who painted this painting. And as the story progresses, you kind of find out why this girl in 2018 was asked to restore this painting despite having no skills in restoration. She's an artist, but she's an artist for something else. And so as you read, you just find out more information. There's a lot of historical elements to it. This book was so fascinating. Like, I have read 3 books by this author now, and all of them have been like really good reads. Like, I've been fascinated by it. There's definitely a lot of like elements to it in terms of racism, in terms of equality, in terms of gender roles, historical and present day. Like, there's just a lot going on in this book, and I just thoroughly enjoyed everything about it. I loved how everything concluded. I definitely had a suspicion about why this girl was asked to restore this painting, and I was very like, this was an incident where I'm glad I was right, because I was like, okay, this, you know, like, I'm happy because it's not a thriller, but I don't know, I was just this is just a good book, guys. Then this next book I picked up is This Is My Brain in Love, which I gave 4 stars. This was honestly such a surprising read for me because I really didn't know what to expect going into it. I haven't really heard much about this book at all, and so I just picked it up thinking, you know what, let me try it out. And because it was arc August as well, I was kind of go through a bunch of my arcs, and this was actually a surprisingly good read. This book basically follows a girl called Jocelyn, where her family owns a Chinese restaurant in upstate New York, and while she originally didn't care much for her restaurant, what she actually cared about was the short film that she's trying to make with her best friend. She didn't want to leave her town because of the life that she's built for herself there. And one day her parents tell her that they're having some issues with the restaurant, they can't really afford it, etc. And so now she's trying to do her best to save her family's restaurant from going down, and she's coming up with all these marketing strategies. So because of that enters a guy called Will. Will has 2 goals. One is to find a paying internship, as well as prove to the school that he has what it takes to become the editor for the school paper. And because of circumstances, Will ends up applying to intern at Jocelyn's restaurant, and the two of them form all these plans, have all these ideas to help save the restaurant from failing, etc. And there is obviously a budding romance. Like I said already, I really enjoyed this book. I like the cultural references about what it is to be a Chinese American trying to survive in America as an entrepreneur while dealing with a lot of obstacles that comes with that territory. I also like reading about the interracial relationship between Jocelyn and Will, and kind of like her parents' stance on it. And as a fellow like Asian American, I was very curious to see like what her parents would do. The next book I picked up is The Passengers, which I gave 3.5 stars. I also read this for my magical readathon, so I will link that vlog above and down below in case you want to check that out. This is basically a sci-fi thriller where it follows these self-driving cars, where one day a bunch of people were held hostage by a hacker who have taken control of this unhackable driving car and rerouted them to a new destination where 2 hours later they are going to die. And so this whole situation is being live broadcasted online, social media, etc. And there is a panel of jury where their normal job is to decide if the car is right in certain car accidents, or if something else could have been done if the car is wrong. So this hacker is trying to ask this jury who they're going to save and why. And as the story kind of progresses, you find out a lot more about these individuals, like the hostages. You find out more about the jury individuals and kind of like what led them to this place and why they are jury members, etc. I thought this book was just really fascinating. It talks a lot about technology. It talks a lot about like ethical, like right and wrong, like morally gray characters. Like it was just a really fascinating read. The beginning kind of was a little rocky. I thought about DNFing it as well, but then I got to a part that I was like, you know what, I am kind of hooked now and I want to know what's going to happen next. Then this next book I picked up is Apples Never Fall by Leanne Moriarty. This book I gave 3 stars. I honestly don't have a ton to say about this book. It was just an average read. I've decided that I'm not going to pick up any more of her books anymore, because looking back on all the books I've read from her, they've all been like 3 stars, like very middle of the road. And so I'm like, why do I keep picking up her books? Like, I don't know. So this book basically follows this mother who went missing, and now the entire family are trying to figure out what happened to her, and the police are called. There's an investigation that's been opened, and there's just a lot of like family drama that happens in this book about how the husband, their father, seems the most likely suspect, and how there's so much about what he did that seems very suspicious to the kids as well as to the police. And so now they're trying to figure out, is their dad the one behind it? Did he do something to their mom? You know, what's going on? And this whole book was just, I don't know, like they're definitely all morally gray characters. That's all I can really say about this book. I felt like I finished it purely for the sake of finishing it. Like it was interesting enough for me to continue. Like I wasn't like immediately DNF, but I honestly don't know why I really continue on this book, to be honest. Then this next book I picked up is The Dream Daughter by Diane Chamberlain. This book I also gave 4 stars. This book was so good. I actually listened to it like halfway on the drive up to my weekend trip, and I was just invested. Like it's about this girl, this woman, I think she was like in the 1960s or something like that, and one day she ends up being pregnant, but at that time they had just discovered like ultrasound, and so she went in there and they did an ultrasound for her, and she finds out that the baby that she's carrying might have like birth defects, and basically like she couldn't be born but they don't advise her because shortly after she will die, like because of this really like bad birth defect. And so she is like very heartbroken because her husband was fighting for the Vietnam War and had passed away in the war, and so this baby is basically the only thing that is of him. And so she's trying to do everything that she can to save her baby. Enters her brother-in-law, who just happens to be a time traveler, and so he basically tells her that there is another option for her to go into the 2000s, present day essentially, and now there is the technology, there's an advancement in the medical field that her baby can in fact be saved. And so she takes this leap and she goes there, and you know, things kind of happen from there. And this book was just wild. I was so hooked from this book, just finding out what would happen to this kid and all the back and forth with the time traveling and stuff that she had to go through for her child. I was honestly shooketh by just what she went through. And I don't know, like there's at one point where I was like, yo, this lady's a little bit crazy now, but also like she's totally justified in terms of like what she's doing, but I'm also like, you're doing a lot. You know, like I was just like listening to the book, like I don't know what's gonna happen next. Like I was hooked. So I really enjoyed this book. Definitely recommend this one. Then this next book I picked up is Black Girls Must Die Exhausted. This book I gave 4 stars. This basically follows a black woman who is trying to become a senior reporter at her job, and she's basically fighting for the position alongside a fellow reporter, this white male reporter. And on top of that, she's dealing with her relationship with her boyfriend, just other things as well, and she just has a lot on her plate right now. This book was actually really fascinating because I was so curious to find like what she was going to do for all her situations, but the one thing that really irked me about this book is the main character's like mindset. So there was a time when her manager was telling her about, you know, how she brings like a fresh perspective, and like how he feels like she has the ability and the potential to bring a fresh view for their audience and get the ratings up, etc. And for some reason she took that as a racist statement, and she was ready to just quit right there and then. And I was just like reading and I was like, okay, I guess I can kind of see that as being racist, but I'm like, I don't really know, because it doesn't seem like that was the intention from what her manager was telling her. And so she even went to ask her father, she went to ask like her relative about like what he told her, what her manager told her, and no one in her family thought what the guy told her was considered racist. They're like, he's just trying to help you, he's giving you a reason, he actually sees potential in you, he's literally trying to help your career. And so I was like, the fact that this girl's like immediate reaction is like, this is racist and I'm quitting, like it just rubbed me the wrong way, because I'm like, why do you like automatically think that when no one else in your family thought that? You know what I mean? Like no one else thought that this was the intention. And I don't know, like it just really irked me when she said that and when she was thinking that, because I was like, you just, I don't know, I feel like when you have this like mindset and you react to it like negatively, which I mean, if that is the case, like obviously like it's justified, but like it clearly was not the intention. And this manager turns out to end up being like a really good mentor for her and like helped her a lot in her career. So like, I don't know, like I was so frustrated during that time. That's the only reason why I didn't give this book 5 stars, because I was really aggravated by this main character. Okay, then this next book I picked up is the Shatter Me series. So I managed to read Restore Me, Defy Me, Ignite Me, and Imagine Me, and these books I gave them all 5 stars. So I am talking about this a lot more in my series vlog, which I don't know when that's coming out, because I still have one more series to read for that and I have not picked it up yet. I just haven't had time to. But once that video's up, be sure to check it out, because I go way more in depth in terms of my thoughts and feelings for each and every single book, because it was a roller coaster ride. It was like 6 books. I was reading them all. I read 2 last month and I read 4 in August, and I was like, you know what, like I love the series, I love the characters, I love everything that they went through, I love just reading about the plot and all the plot twists. Like there was so much about the second half of the series that threw me off guard. Like I did not expect the trajectory that the books went, but it was so engaging. Like I was so riveted. I really want to know what's happening. I also love Warner obviously, and Kenji, and just like all the characters. The one thing I would say is I feel like James, I wish he was more prominent in this series. I feel like he was there, but like really much more of a side character in the background. Half the time I didn't even see him. So that was like the only thing that I wish was more prominent in this second half of the series. But overall, really enjoyed it. Highly recommend this series. So anyways, these are all the books that I read in the month of August. Let me know down below, which books did you read for August? Have you read any of the books that I mentioned this time? Like, what are your thoughts about some of the books I read? And I guess some of the more controversial thoughts I had regarding certain characters and whatever. Like, let me know down below. But as always, if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. It really does help out my channel. And if you see more content of me, please don't hesitate to subscribe down below, as well as hit the notification bell. And as always, don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.